and welcome to the Smashi Business Show. Today is Wednesday, August 27th, 2025, and I'm Wart Ahmed.
And I'm Richard Fitzgerald.
And we've got a packed show for you today. So first up, we're going to be discussing how Lunate is going to set up a $2 billion joint investment platform with Brevan at ADGM. Kuwait has revoked a Sabah newspaper and their TV licenses. And Norway fund has dumped Caterpillar and Israeli banks over human rights abuses. And Egypt is to launch a high-speed electric train network in 2026. The Love in Dubai Community Awards 2025 celebrate the extraordinary achievements of individuals who have made a genuine and lasting impact on Dubai this year. Now, the winners will be announced at an awards show on September 11, so stay tuned. Richard, thank you so much for jumping into the show today. So just to get it started, Abu Dhabi-based investment giant Lunate is expanding into hedge funds. Now, the firm announced it will acquire a minority stake in UK hedge fund Brevan, one of the world's largest players. Now, financial terms remain undisclosed, but the move underscores Abu Dhabi's growing role as a global financial hub.
Glad to be here, Ward. And yeah, continuing on that story, as part of the deal, both firms will launch a new investment platform anchored at ADGM, the capital's international financial centre. Lunate, which has pledged an initial $2 billion to seed the platform, with plans to raise further capital from both local and international investors.
Now, Khalifa Al-Suwaidi, managing partner at Lunate, said the partnership marks the firm's expansion into hedge funds. Lunate already manages $110 billion across private markets, ranging from buyouts and growth equity to venture capital and private credit. Now, the Brevan tie-up adds a new asset class to its portfolio.
Another example of the capital of capital striking again. So Brevan, meanwhile, oversees $34 billion globally for institutional clients. The hedge fund established in its ADGM office in early 2023, 2 years in, which has since become its largest hub by assets under management, AUM. The Lunate deal further solidifies Abu Dhabi's status as a magnet for global finance. As I said, the capital of capital.
Now, I think with this entire story, I see Lunate as the clear winner here. I don't think it's more of a, like Lunate went to Brevan and say, hey, like, let's work together. I think it's probably Brevan who is like, hey guys, like, let's start this investment platform together.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I have to admit, I don't exactly know the difference between what Lunate are doing now and what this platform will do. I think, a kind of hedge fund not operate in the private markets, that 110 billion, are they not already operating? Is that not a hedge fund? Do you need a platform? What sort of platform is this? I'm not exactly sure. But I think what it's evidence of is that, partnerships work. Partnerships is one way to bring in household names, expertise, and attract more people to setting up in Abu Dhabi.
And what's so interesting is if you actually search up what Lunate is, like the word Lunate, it's your joint bone on your wrist. And it's like, I think that what the entire thing is that it's there to move hands. It's there to move things around. And I think what's very interesting about Abu Dhabi as a capital, Rich, is the fact that they just have so many hedge funds and they have so many sovereign wealth funds. It's not like, like they placed one company and they're like, listen, you guys are going to do all of this. They have different hedge funds to manage different things. It's not just Lunate that stands out in Abu Dhabi, it's also Multiply Group. So Multiply Group, but they have less money though. They have less money. I believe it's around 11 to 12 billion dollars, but it still stands out because they have all these different corporations without us knowing. It's actually the same people who are managing them. And I think that this is so important because each one of them has a different purpose. Nowadays, we're seeing how Multiply, they're expanding. They expanded into Spain recently with retail. They're expanding into media. And then with Lunate, I think that they're taking more of a business focus with it.
Yeah, I think, you're right. And, wealth managers would tell you, how sovereign wealth funds and how large investment groups, hedge funds or other, manage their assets. It's all about risk diversification across different asset classes. And, while it might seem ambiguous what's happening under Lunate, it's actually, it's not intentionally ambiguous, it's intentionally investments, right? So it's intentionally diversified. So whereas regular listeners might resonate with a consumer brand name and say, oh, Nike do retail apparel, that's quite clear. But when the reason why capital investment entities are diversified, they might have a portfolio that's 30% across retail, 30% across energy, or etc. And it's similar to one's own personal economy, one's own investment assets. It's supposed to be diversified. So it's what I find really brilliant here is that we're talking about ADGM, which for Augustus Media Holding, that's where what we have is. Our holding group is there, a SPV, a special purpose vehicle. So many people might think, oh, that's that region in Abu Dhabi that's regulated like DIFC. But when we talk about this region, we think of successes, whether it's the Burj Khalifa or Emirates Airline. ADGM is clearly a success in attracting family assets, hedge funds. I heard a story that Ray Dalio was moving all his team from Singapore to Abu Dhabi, not from the US, but from Singapore. And I don't know the number, like 100, 200 people who are top of their game globally at managing financial assets, because he's an expert, right? And he's written books about the all-weather investment strategy. So Ray Dalio talks about 4 seasons in terms of the different risks that you can have in the financial climate. Is just like the weather climate. So when at the moment, if interest rates are high and if other economic indicators are high or low, then you're weather protected by being diversified in certain ways. So if he's bringing that expertise, not just as a place to chill out and have a villa in Sadia or whatever, or wherever it would be, but to actually have this talent and expertise there, then you can see what Abu Dhabi is doing, and it's quite fascinating. We talk a lot about what Dubai is doing, we talk a lot about what Riyadh and Saudi Arabia is doing, but this is another example of sovereign wealth funds, of hedge funds, of capital moving to Abu Dhabi, and it's quite interesting.
And you know what, Rich, I think the thing that I love the most about it is that these people are not just like bringing their capital here and they're setting up and it's just like business. They're setting up their entire lives here. I remember I was telling Majid this, but we have a listener, his name's Johannes. He listens to Smashi Business, and he told me he was walking in Abu Dhabi and he just saw Ray Dalio just running right past him. And then I have a friend, they live in Dubai Hills, and they were like, they just saw the CEO of Pretty Little Thing just taking a run around the community.
Oh, more
it's like, like these people are not just coming here to make their investments, they're coming here to quite literally lead a life, you know?
You're right, and it's like, in the past, people would wonder, why do 8 or 10 million people live in London? Why would you choose London as a European in the past? Is it because its financial markets are good and its capital markets? And that can be one indicator. The ADX and that liquidity on the stock market is one indicator. But private capital does move the world, right? It owns lots of asset classes around the world. And, by seeing ADGM as being that secure place for private capital to be managed and not having all these taxes and also having that quality of life and that livability as well, it just makes it really interesting. And of course, they're investing a lot in culture and everything in Abu Dhabi too.
Yes, they are. And in a really interesting what some people may call a cultural setback in Kuwait. Kuwait's Ministry of Information has revoked the licenses of the Sabah Arabic language newspaper and its satellite television channel. Now, the move comes just 3 days after the government stripped their owner, Dr. Barakat Hudayban al-Rashidi, of his Kuwaiti nationality.
So following the ministry's decision, the channel immediately went off air, while the newspaper, first published in March 2008, suspended all operations. The sudden halt marks a major shift in the shake-up of Kuwait's media sector. So
Dr. Al-Rashidi, who served as the editor-in-chief of Al-Sabah and the chairman of the International University for Science and Technology, lost his citizenship under an Emiri decree issued during that time. Now, several of his family members and associates were also affected, unfortunately.
So this decree stems from a 1950s law. The revocation effectively dismantles and Rashidi's media presence in Kuwait. Authorities have not provided detailed reasons, but the decisions align with tightened oversight on media ownership and nationality regulations.
Now, reports suggest that a Kuwaiti investor is in talks already to acquire Al Sabah's publishing operations. Now, if successful, the deal could reshape one of Kuwait's long-standing media institutions and potentially alter the country's media landscape. Now, you know, Rich, you have a media company. What do you think about this? Do you ever have like a fear of something like this happening?
Look, I think there's many.
Your mind?
Well, it does, yeah. Obviously, you know, regulation is part of business, and especially, you know, with operations across the region. We haven't yet fully entered into the Kuwaiti market, but of course, these stories are interesting from a business point of view. From a, you know, from a citizenship, and there's obviously a story happening there in Kuwait. I think 50,000. People up until early 2025 have lost their nationality, and it stems back to a decree, I think in 1959, under a national law. And there's different reasons for this, but you know, not knowing the finer detail of it, I think it is important that countries do know what they're doing in terms of you know, nationality and things like that. I think where the overlap is, and you know, I'll speak of it from a media point of view. I think the overlap is, you know, aside from the nationality declarations, there's obviously media laws as well. And in Kuwait, not every country has a media law that says you have to be a national to own. For example, the current active media law in Saudi Arabia was written in 1972. There are draft versions, but media is moving so fast for a new law, but it's not published officially yet. But the 1972 version says your editor needs to be of a Saudi national and needs to be over 30 years of age. It doesn't mean the owner needs to be. So, for example, Augustus Saudia, Sharikat Augustus Saudia, has a GAMR, which is a regulated license in Saudi, and I'm the proprietor, and I'm not a Saudi national. I have a Kama, but I'm not a Saudi national, but I have to appoint an editor on the license who's a Saudi national. So every country has different laws, and I think in the UAE, you know, we covered this lately. Mohammed Al-Shahid, involved in the Media Regulatory Office in UAE, issued at a nice press conference in Emirates Towers at Creators HQ a few months ago, a new law that says basically, you know, that tightens how publishers and content creators are getting advertising, and there's lots of decree on this. But what the UAE have done, and I think it's quite innovative, and I think it will be replicated around the world, is that publishing, actually everyone's a publisher. So to just give Augustus Media, which we have, you know, we have an MRO license in Abu Dhabi on top of our business license for, you know, to give us an extra license to publish in Abu Dhabi is great. But if I post a tweet, then that has the same impact, and that should be regulated in the same way. So I think what they're doing now is, rather than getting everyone who opens a social media account to get a license, they're saying, okay, if you're running a business, if you're taking advertising, then you should have a license. So I think they're using that as a differentiator, which is quite impressive and quite smart. But stemming back to this situation is, you've got two types of regulation happening in Kuwait that have overlapped. One is the citizenship regulation, and the other is the media one, and they've overlapped, and it's a little bit confusing. There were some comments on the post where, you know, I think them saying that you have to be a Kuwaiti national to have a media outlet in Kuwait, I think that will need to be refreshed in the future, because you know, say I'm an immigrant in Kuwait and I become an influencer and I don't have a Kuwaiti passport, then can I take a sponsored post? Therefore, am I a business? So I think there's some sort of, it would be interesting to see, will all the Gulf Cooperation Council countries come together and align on this, you know, with what the UAE have done, and how do you regulate that in the future? Is there some alignment on that? But I don't think it's just a Kuwaiti thing to figure out in terms of regulation. I think it's a global thing in terms of regulation, like we've covered at length. Ownership in the UK when IMI were trying to buy the Telegraph, and should you be a British national? So I think it's at length that people need to,
But like, Rich, like at the same time, like just to take a look at it like on a human level, you know, this guy over here, Dr. Hudayba, he's a doctor. You know, he has a PhD, and I think for me, like the entire point of this story, it was like blaring red flags at me of never get too over yourself. You know, maybe you have a PhD, maybe you're really good at philosophy, and maybe you're such a good intellectual, but it doesn't matter if you're an intellectual. You're not meant to.
I don't know if he's got.
No,
Look, we shouldn't really. I don't think he's got over himself. I think, maybe, who knows? Maybe he's happy. Maybe he's not. Maybe this was coming. Maybe it wasn't. Like, I wouldn't comment too much on whether this individual did anything per se.
No, but
in
it's
terms
not
of,
about him doing anything, though.
Yeah.
I look at it at this point of, like, don't let your enthusiasm get to you. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, you might have a really good
But
story.
if the Kuwaiti government doesn't get you with the regulation, the newspaper industry is changing, the TV industry is changing. Who knows? Maybe they're badly in debt, and then maybe this is a blessing, because it's hard to make money off newspapers and print. Like, I'm listening to a book at the moment about Condé Nast in the 80s, and the opulence and the extravagance on these titles were incredible. Like how much money they were spending on budgets and everything. Like, this industry has evolved so fast. So I would be more, is it a viable business to run a newspaper in Kuwait anymore? There's a brilliant Netflix show called The Exchange. Have you seen it?
I've heard of it.
They have 2 seasons, and it's the exchange is a boursa, so it's a Kuwaiti stock exchange, and it's 2 females, friends who are trying to make their way, and they're helping IPOs, and it's actually brilliantly done. But one of the individuals, one of the protagonists, one of the main ladies on the show who's building a career on the stock exchange, her dad is the editor of a newspaper, not unlike Al Sabah, a Kuwaiti newspaper. And Kuwaiti newspapers and how he's portrayed are very important. They affect the IPOs, what they publish and things like that.
Yeah.
But that's a bygone era. That really is a bygone era in terms of how people consume media. Of course, these titles have legacy, and of course they can be revived, and of course they can live in a digital world. But the era is bygone, and the time and the importance and the regulation is bygone. So I think, from a media owner point of view, I would be more worried about regulation on media and the changing pace of the viable business model. I wouldn't set up a print newspaper in Kuwait today. I would set up Love in Kuwait, which we're trying to do. But there's no print and there's no TV. So the license that we need is a different license. So if I went to the Kuwaiti regulators, I wouldn't be asking for the same license he has that's been revoked from him, because that's not viable. That doesn't help my business.
Yeah.
So there's no point. Like, it's interesting you say when someone is looking to acquire their assets, they're not looking for the license. They're looking for the followers that they have on social media, or maybe the SEO domain equity of the Al Sabah. They're not looking for the print factory, because what would you do with it? You would shut it down. Think about it. We're in Dubai Production City Ward, which was designed when they thought that print books would be and newspapers would be here. There is no printing in these units. We're broadcasting live on a live stream. These were vacant for years because media changed. We have Daimler training centers beside us, not a newspaper printing a newspaper beside us, right? There's some printing in the whole production city, but we're now turning them into studios because it's streaming and media has evolved, and TCOM and the licenses have moved to speed with this. So things evolve so much in media, and it's a lot to do with business viability. Again, for example, when I moved here nearly 15 years ago, I was told there's 4 newspaper licenses in the UAE, and one was owned as a JV with Daily Mail Group in the UK, and it was publishing Al Gharhoud, which was 7 days, and it was a free tabloid newspaper, and the distribution model was in the buildings across the UAE. In the mornings, you would get it getting into your car in a taxi. A lot of people will know letters to 7 days. Anyway, long story short, they were shutting down because of business models and license pressure in 2016, and we bought their social media assets. We didn't buy their printing. We didn't buy their website domain, even from an SEO point of view as redirect.
Yeah.
We bought their social media assets. So if I'm looking at this, first of all, I would say, how do I get Love in Kuwait to be a licensed entity in Kuwait before we enter that market? One, as a foreign national, and if it's allowed, and this would signify to me that it's not allowed. And then 2, how can I buy these assets as well? But probably I can't because of the first one. But could I partner with, I've met some really good businessmen from Kuwait who have Ghalia Tech, which is a big publishing digital agency in Kuwait that has done really well over the years. And we discussed doing a partnership in Kuwait in the past, and maybe we would do it again. And maybe that's that type of opportunity. But that's what you would look at, the digital assets, not the newspaper, and not even the TV license. Because what does one do with a TV license now? It's moving on to OSs and streaming apps and free ad-supported, acronym FAST, free ad-supported streaming service. So it's, in Love in Dubai will launch a FAST channel soon at Samsung TV Plus, which is regulated through our online broadcasting license here, not through a traditional TV license,
No, I 100% see what you mean. I think you're thinking about it from that perspective of ownership, but I'm thinking about it from this perspective of, obviously we don't know what this man did or what happened, or even if he did anything. Maybe it just had to do with how he acquired the nationality in the first place. But I'm thinking about it from this perspective of, like, when I say don't get too over your head until you lose your job, it's like, you remember when Bassem Youssef, a long time ago, he used to live in Egypt, and he had his entire show, and he used to make a lot of like satirical jokes about the government, and then at some point he had to flee. I think he left to Dubai, and now he's settled in LA. It's like, my point is don't get too over your head and too enthusiastic about telling certain stories and telling certain narratives that you don't have your place anymore.
Fair.
I'm thinking of it from that human level, because I think, like, no one cares if you're a philosopher or you're an intellectual or your thoughts are really good. I think.
Why doesn't Bassem Youssef have a YouTube show?
That's a really good question.
It's nothing to do with Egypt and the regulation. These are just excuses. These are just narratives that people say why they don't exist. Bassem Youssef attends all the shows around the world. He goes on, he talks brilliantly, and he's amazing. But Piers Morgan has Uncensored, which is YouTube, and he pulled out of a TV thing. Why doesn't Bassem Youssef have Uncensored, his version?
He didn't think of how to commercialize it well enough for himself.
My point is that there are roadblocks, and we can say it's regulatory. We could say that this person no longer has a business because of the regulation, or we could say that there's other factors. Like if I lose my business today because of regulation, and I give up and I do something else, will I for the rest of my life say I got done because of regulation?
Yeah.
No, I won't.
That's a good perspective.
I'll move with the times. I'll move on to YouTube. I'll move to another country. Or I'll do something else. I respect regulations. I think it's important. I think, I respect what Kuwait is trying to do. You talked about it on the show a few days ago about Kuwait being part of, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, right? And the investments that Kuwait is doing. And there was another headline saying Kuwait is going to become a new tourism authority. I watch a lot of the Kuwaiti dramas. In fact, I watch.
Oh, they're so good.
They're so good.
They're so good.
I watched it. When everyone was watching other stuff in Ramadan, me and my wife were watching a Kuwaiti drama. The talent in Kuwait in media is amazing. It's fascinating. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant country. I can't wait to be involved in it in the future. And we welcome this sort of. At least these governments are active. At least they're looking at things. It might look like drama. It might look scary to some, but Kuwait is a modern Gulf state, and it's in one way moving with the times, and they're figuring things out. So more power to them.
They are, and more power to Norway's fund. Norway's $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund has divested from U.S. construction giant Caterpillar over its alleged role in Israeli rights violation in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. Now, the decision follows concerns about the company's products being used in unlawful demolitions.
So the fund also removed 5 Israeli banks. The names of them are, if I get this right, Alim Bank Naomi, Mizrahi Ta'ahot, and First International Bank, and as well Phoebe Holdings. The Ethics Council, which is really interesting to have an Ethics Council in this level, the Ethics Council said that these banks provide essential financial services that maintain settlements in violation of international law.
So the Norwegian Central Bank stated Caterpillar products are being used in extensive and systematic violations of international and humanitarian law, and that the company has not acted to prevent such use by Israeli authorities.
Prior to divestment, the fund held a 1.17% stake in Caterpillar, valued at $2.1 billion, which means that the total value markup of capital is about $200 billion. if that's right. And then stakes in the 5 banks totaled $661 million. The fund manages investments in roughly 8,400 companies worldwide.
Do you see this as a power move, Rich? Do you
I see this
like,
as a governance move, internal governance, which is respect to them.
Respect to them. I don't think of it like that because, like, you know, I was telling Majid this. For me, it's like, okay, what they did is great. Hey, I'm not trying to undermine, like, what a great move this is for the entire world, that companies are waking up and they're realizing what's happening. But I see it as, okay, like, they've divested. You know, it's a 1% stake. It's worth $2 billion. Again, they're earning money. All of these funds, these companies, they're taking money. Does that make sense? Like, yes, it's great. It's great that you've divested. It's great that you woke up and you realized, hey, like, I should not be here. But hey, like, they left and they took the money with them. And that's what I'm trying to say. I think for me, I more of see it as a power move when you're actually taking something, you're taking your own money, your own hard-earned money, and you're like, you know what, Palestinians, this money's for you. Does that make sense? Like, I was listening to the Sunny Varki podcast with Anas Bukhashin, and he said
It's
something.
good listen. Yeah.
It really is, and he said something that really just, it touched my heart in the sense of, he said that when you give charity, when you give an amount of money, it should pinch you. You should feel it. They're not feeling anything. They're not affected. They're getting billions in dollars back from all these stakes that they've sold. You know, this genocide has been raging for so long that these companies have been working in Israel and they've been making money out of it. This has not pinched them. They're not affected. And now they get this gold medal because we have so many press releases that are out and so many headlines.
They're not getting a gold medal. And yeah, we could say, I see where you're coming from. What's that acronym word? Is it? I keep forgetting it. CSG, corporate. When you have governance, environment, ESG, environment.
Yeah, I think you got it right.
Yeah, so one of the G is for governance, right? And who's going to regulate? We're talking about regulation before, but who's going to regulate governance? Is it a board? Is it a CEO? Is it individuals? Is it the government, right? And when we talk about the sovereign wealth funds in this region, do they have an ethics committee? You know, when Facebook had some issues, they set up an independent entity to have an ethics board, and they hired people from around the world. It's quite interesting. There's a lady from Pakistan on the board. They're well remunerated, but they have an independent government body to do ethics. So if I'm doing governance, you know, if 8,600 companies, how do you have governance about who decides what to invest in? So they have an ethics committee, and this ethics committee has policies which, in inverted commas here on the teleprompter, it said war crimes, international war crimes. So that's part of their policies. I don't think they're sitting down here and going, how do we get press releases and how do we get gold medals? You know, if I'm thinking about, I have procurement in this company. We have 5 offices, we have 110 people. If I'm thinking about, do I want to make headlines if I decide to use a software that's from Tel Aviv or not? Do I think of that, or do I think of personal interest? No. What I would think of is, how do I do governance in this company? If I want to list on the Tadawul in the future, what's my procurement strategy? I worked with WPP, Sir Martin Sorrell's global entity before he left, now at S4C Capital. And each year we had an anti-bribery assessment course online, a portal to do. And it was a governance portal. It was saying, do you have shareholders in any other company? Do you take brown envelopes? Do you do this? So it's an internal governance. No one's really telling them to do that. They're having practice. You know, we were doing a pitch recently. And we were in the board table and we did a rehearsal. And I saw some graphics on the screen, right? We're a 10-year-old company. And the graphics on the screen on the pitch, I said, oh, who designed those? Because they look good. And someone said, oh, a friend did. And I was like, what? So the reason why one of our team reached out to a friend to help them with they didn't pay, I was told. I was like, what? Shocked that this senior person in my company thinks that that's cool, you know? And that means I have an internal governance issue. Now, there's nothing illegal with it, but it's not compliant with, it's not procurement, because if I have 110 people or 210 people or 2,000 people, and they all think that they're going to WhatsApp someone to, it's like if I own a burger shop, right?
Yeah.
And I'm missing meat, and so I go into my friend's kitchen to get some meat for the burgers to serve the customers. That's essentially what they did, but they don't think of it like that. So I now know I have an internal training job to do, right? So when you're putting policy, when you're running companies, and when you're running an investment vehicle that invests in 8,600 companies, to have an ethics committee is fascinating. It's brilliant. It's great. Bravo. Well done. Now, does every sovereign wealth fund in the region have an ethics committee, or are we asking what individuals feel emotionally and personally about genocides? Because that's not also a way to scale and to provide stability and to provide fairness across investments, is it?
Yeah.
Right? Because everyone has personal preferences. Everyone emotionally responds to different things. You would hope that everyone would respond in the same way to genocide, but evidently people don't, right?
Yeah.
Apparently we have to have debates about this sort of thing, which side are you on? Like you would hope, but the evidence is that, there is going to be, different sides of opinion. So what they've done is they have an ethics committee, and what the ethics committee has done, and what is evident here, is they've divested, not to make profits, because ultimately their goal is to make profits, but they think the best way to make profits is to run ethically. Like Unilever think the best way is to run ethically. And when I'm building a company that wants to be around for a long time, I want to do what right, and I want to have internal. I often think like, what's the role of a board? Is a board for governance, or is a board for WASTA or for advice? Right? But if the board is your only line of governance, what about the day-to-day stuff? What about that example that I gave about the graphic? And no one would question that. And no one's teaching me to do this. No one's saying, hey, Rich, you need to make sure that someone doesn't WhatsApp to get a free graphic for a pitch, right? No one's telling me to do that. But I can see that if I'm building compliance, I need procurement, I need everything at all levels. Whether we do 3 quotes or whether we do preferred suppliers, another example, we were working on a piece of business in Qatar, and we needed a CGI video, and someone sent me a quote, and I said, oh, okay, cool. And I'm wondering, how did they get that quote? Did that supplier in Qatar, did we go through a procurement system? Is that a preferred supplier? Was there a vetting process? Did we pick it over someone else? Is it someone's friend in Qatar? Right? So I'm doing internal governance all the time on these things. There's nothing illegal. It's just business. In other words, both have licenses, but I'm thinking, how do I build this business across 5, 11, 22 Arab League countries? How do I build processes? How do I build internal systems like WPP did? How does it take 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Because if I'm building what they have in Norway, which many in this region have emulated, the sovereign wealth funds here are always impressed by Norway. Trump wants a sovereign wealth fund for the US, and he claims that he got 10%.
But he mentioned Saudi.
He mentioned Saudi.
Theirs is really good.
There is really good, but do they have an ethics committee? Right? Are they divesting from genocidal? And what questions do you ask? How do you decide these things? So I think it's just I'm impressed from a governance point of view.
Rich, I just have a question. Like this idea of like someone being at work, an employee, and then asking their friend for help with something. Is it that issue of like the fact that you didn't pay them, or is it the issue of that fact of that you didn't get this done in-house, that you weren't self-sufficient enough to maybe ask your coworkers around you?
No, both of those things are fine to a degree, but how do I equip you, words, as a business, so so we can do this? So do I have a system around freelancers? Do I have a freelancer budget?
Right.
Do I have a system around this? Do I have a payment method? Do I have a check to see, does this person have a freelance license? Because in the UAE, you need a freelance license. If I'm a listed company and I'm handing cash out or favors for work, just say we win the business that we're pitching for, and just say in a year's time, that freelancer who did a favor for our individual says, that's my work.
Why didn't you credit my work?
Yeah, and why didn't you give me money that you won the pitch?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
But and then I'll go, oh, but it was a friend, it was a favor. Look, here's a screenshot on WhatsApp. No, but I shouldn't have allowed it in the first place. But and I'm employing senior people who've worked here for 10, 15, 20 years who see no problem with this. So, and it's happening under my watch, which I'm responsible for, you know?
Yeah.
Now, I made a decision not to include that in should we win, should we publish, because not there was anything wrong, but the individuals would say to me, hey, we're under pressure, we needed a favor, we were stuck, and we didn't think that the capacity of the current in-house individuals were able to deliver on this. So I would go, okay, well done, ingenuity is our value, you found a solution. However, what are you doing to ensure that we can build on this in the future? How are you working with freelance budgets, which we've trained them on? How are you working with procurement? How are you working with systems, you know?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And for the final topic of the day, we always love to end it on a positive note. A lot of Egyptians are excited about this. Egypt is planning to launch its first high-speed electric train in June 2026. Now, the 2,000-kilometer network will connect in Sukhna on the Red Sea to Alexandria, El Alamein, and Mersa Matruh on the Mediterranean, supporting the country's transport modernization plans.
I love this story. Okay, so the people who won the contract is Germany's Siemens Mobility. They're developing a project alongside Egyptian contractors. Another key segment is linking Salam City and 10th of Ramadan City, and of course the new administrative capital on the east of Cairo. It's expected to be completed by March 2026, according to the Egyptian presidency.
Now, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi chaired a meeting reviewing the East-West Nile monorail, its passenger stations, and integration with the East Cairo monorail and the bus rapid transit project. Now, the East Nile monorail is slated to open in November 2025.
Cairo also plans to spend $1.6 billion on a third high-speed train line next year, extending the 175-kilometer from Kenna Governor to Safaga Port on the Red Sea coast. Timely completion was emphasized by LCC.
Now, since 2014, Egypt has spent $206 billion to modernize infrastructure. Now, these rail projects aim to boost urban, industrial, and tourism development, further connecting the country's Red Sea and Mediterranean regions. I think that this is so exciting. I think especially with Egypt, sometimes the headlines that pop up for me, they're not always the most positive. It's like, ooh, Suez Canal, we're losing $800 million every single month. And so the fact that, you know, they get this train, they get this rail, like I thought about Etihad rail, and these things are so exciting because I know it's something that's so simple, but transport is honestly a burden for so many people. And so to have that in Africa, to have that in Egypt, it's a step forward. And what will happen is there will be this domino effect. You know, if Egypt goes on to do it, later on we're going to see more nations in the African region doing it.
I agree. I think it's a brilliant story. I've often had to get a plane from Cairo down to the Red Sea for a race or for tourism because the drive is too long. And to know that there's other transport there is brilliant. Like, Egypt's such a big country and there's so many pockets of tourism and coastal and development. You know, like Guna on the Red Sea is now a project that was built by the Suez family 30 years ago that's now all year round development. And we're in summer season where Sahel on the north coast has become so popular over the last few years, but it's very much seen as seasonal. Why? Because even to get from one resort or one development in Sahel to another, the infrastructure, the road, the connectivity isn't necessarily there. Neither is the schools. You were listening to Sonny Barkey today. You know, who's the Sonny Barkey of Egypt for the next 30 years in terms of education and schools? Who's going to build the schools in the north coast? If Ras Al Hikmet has been built with UAE funding and there's another development under Qatari funding, now who's building the infrastructure around this? So I love that, you know, people love to criticize to a degree, maybe not in media, but yeah, I think what's happening in Egypt, they're going through a period of austerity. There's a lot of, you know, the currency was devalued a few times. Now you're seeing lots of government investments on the new Cairo, the new administrative capital, and you can see that, you know, these are things that will drive an economy. Transport, we drive around Dubai and we take it for granted. You know, we're talking about traffic now, but isn't it amazing that we have such good roads, and we have such good transport, and we can build our businesses here because of that infrastructure.
And it's like also like with Egypt, honestly, Rich, like it has such a close place to my heart because as a Sudanese, after the Sudanese civil war, most of Sudan went to Egypt. By the way, most of Sudanese people, most of Sudanese communities, they either went to Dubai or they went to Egypt. And it's like, you know, Egypt being the country that it is, it welcomed so many of us. It homed so many of us for the longest time ever. A lot of businesses like Biziano, Soda, Baraka Biscuits, they were able to actually restart production again in Egypt. So that I think that with Egypt, they stand out because they don't just give opportunities to Egyptians. I think that they give opportunities to a bunch of communities. And that's a wrap for today, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into the Smashi Business Show. Make sure to follow us across all social media channels at Smashi Business and stay ahead with our daily newsletter. You'll find the subscription link in the description.
This has been a Smashi Business Show, a Smashi Business production, part of the Gussus Media Podcast Network. A big shout out to our 1.5 million monthly listeners across all platforms. You make this possible. If you're one of them, we appreciate you. Thank you very much.